Hello everyone and welcome to our April event. We're using YouTube and not Big Orange Art for this event due to some unforeseen circumstances. So today we'll have a talk from James II. We'll talk about API integration testing, from Betamax to VCR, harden your API integration testing. Our platform is usually Big Orange Heart, and we continue to support them. And their aim is to support and promote positive well-being and mental health within remote working communities. So now I'll hand over to Hugh, who will talk about the member survey results.
Yep, hi everyone. So last time, you may remember, I sent out a survey to get some information from everyone about how the event will work going forwards. So I'd like to share the results from that before we go on with the talk. So first off, we asked if Leeds PHP was to host an in-person event again in Leeds, would you attend it? Had a quite even split on this. So the slight majority of people preferred to attend in person, but there's a good chunk of people who would prefer in the remote events. Perhaps what I should have done here is put in a question about whether people are local to Leeds or not, but I didn't. Sorry, I don't know. But either way, there's a good portion of people want to attend in person, but there's also a good portion of people who prefer the remote format. So a bit more granular on that one. If we were to hold in-person events, the majority of people, vast majority in this case, would prefer to attend in person, but also would still like the online offerings when it's not convenient to attend in person for any reason. Some people primarily would want to just use the online platform, and then some people would primarily want to watch and attend in person, with then a smaller number wanting to just use the catch-up afterwards. So what we can see from this information is that there's a good amount of people who do want to come to in-person events again. So I think we will look to do in-person events again at some point soon. But we're also seeing that a good amount of people do want to continue to attend remotely. So we'll definitely look to continue to have a remote option for those people as well. I think the remote option has been great for over COVID, for allowing this to continue whilst people have not been able to meet in person, but also it's been good for people who, for whatever reason, can't attend, whether it's because of location or because of for any reason. It's really good to be able to serve those people as well. So we definitely want to continue to do that going forwards. In terms of what people think is most important for in-person events, the vast majority of people think networking is important. So we'll just be able to meet each other and chat. So we'll definitely factor that into whatever we do. This one, what do we think the balance between soft skills and technical topics should be? The technical topics on the right and the soft skills on the left in this case. So people seem to mostly want a balance of the two. Some people want the sort of edging towards technical. So we'll try and cater for that in our topics as well going forwards. In terms of what topics have been requested, as the vast majority, or the one that came out on top mostly, was unit testing and test-driven development, CI/CD stuff around that. So tonight's talk will be a good one for that, but also we'll look to see what else we can do in that space. But hopefully tonight will be of interest. So we'll hand across now to James for his talk on that topic. If anyone wants to ask any questions, stick them in the YouTube chat and we'll get to them at the end. So I'll hand over to you then, James.
Hi, everybody. Can you see my screen and hear me? Because I don't... Oh, okay. Everything's changed. Oh, there we go. This is right. Okay, so presumably I'm sort of full screen now. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's thanks for sort of last minute sort of changing the format, considering that Big Orange Heart obviously had to change things. I'd say, like, for most user groups, some organisations and stuff, that was that was really super organized and quite interesting to actually see the results of things, especially if you like, especially people asking for sort of soft skills versus sort of technical skills, and seeing what kind of people want, what the kind of thing people want, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see that lots of people really like test-driven development has become a thing. The whole talk is not about test-driven development specifically, but it's how to implement it as part of it. So, I mean, for some reason I'm talking myself down as if it's not relevant, and it like totally is. This is basically a testing talk. Also, thanks for inviting me back to Leeds PHP. It's been quite a while since I spoke. I spoke on Xdebug last time, and I think it was like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know, something like that. For anyone watching that doesn't know me, here's my stuff, but I need to actually get Stream Deck to actually work properly. Let's try and get the clicker working, shall we? Is that all right? That looks like it's cut off a bit at the end. Maybe it's okay. I don't think it's this works fine when we're testing for it. So hopefully, okay, fine. It's just sorry, thanks you. It's just me being cut off. So, yeah, for anyone, why is my clicker not working? Is anything going to work today? Oh yes, it's because I need to click on that. There we go. It's real basic stuff. Here's some stuff about me. Hello, I am Jim Second. There is my LinkedIn. I'm very active on Twitter, like a lot of people that are into that are developer advocates. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. I'm basically a developer. That's the easiest way of explaining it. And there's my GitHub with all of my unfinished nightmares, etc., etc. And my job title is I'm a senior developer advocate at Vonage. If you have not heard of Vonage, you may have heard of our previous incarnation, which was Nexmo. If you haven't heard of Nexmo, you may have heard of Twilio. If you haven't heard of Twilio, we're a cloud communications API platform. So two-factor authentication via SMS or via WhatsApp, or automated voice calls via an API, that kind of thing. If you want to know more about what we do, you want to hit me up for some sort of credit to sort of play around a bit with our APIs and stuff like that, give me a shout. That applies for questions after the talk as well, but obviously we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So, right, to get started, just going to do like a bit of an outline. So you know that it's about API testing, but here's the sort of like, here's what we'll cover. It's like a story, this bit. Here's a statement. Testing external APIs that your software relies on is hard, right? So you've got like software and it relies on an external API in order to work that you don't own. It's hard. Whilst mucking around, I found something on GitHub. It's a library. It's not even new. It's like, you know, it's been around quite a while. So I thought, you know what? Check it out. What's going on? And oh my goodness. Why isn't everybody doing this? Why is nobody doing this? We've got it all wrong. Everyone, stop what you're doing. We're doing it all wrong. We've been doing it all wrong. Everybody should be using this, right? That sounds like I'm sort of like employed by them, but all I'm trying to say here is a bit kind of mind-blowing. So what we'll go through is we're going to go through what problems come about when you have external API dependencies that you have no control over, what the library is that I found and what it does, when to use it, how to use it, should you use it? That's classic engineer phrase. It depends. And then I thought that there was going to be something else, but we're going straight onto this. So this is a bit difficult when you do it virtually because you don't have a show of hands, but this item of beauty here, this is a Betamax tape from Sony, and it was created. I thought it was created before VHS, but someone corrected me. Actually, it was created after VHS, right? And it's a home video cassette system invented late 70s, early 80s, and it was a proprietary format that Sony created, and they tried to get people to purchase it as like that sort of closed consumer kind of Apple way of like, here is the thing, you will buy the thing, and all the competition is not comparable because we're the superior product, right? And it was ahead of its time. It was definitely ahead of its time, and it did compete infamously with this. And you might find that you recognise what this is, maybe probably more. Now there's a big difference. This is VHS, but it wasn't as technologically superior as Betamax in terms of its quality on the film. But that didn't matter, because VHS was created by JVC as an open format instead of proprietary, which meant that Hitachi and Mitsubishi and someone else, like Hitachi, someone else, I can't remember, all got on board with it. And as a result, you've got the combined effort. It was already, because it wasn't as technologically like superior, it was cheaper to manufacture. And this thing blew Betamax out of the water. And there we go. That's the story. Now, of course, what everyone is asking, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're like, come on. Is this relevant, Jim? Is it really? And the answer is, I've been invited to speak at Leeds PHP. It's a user group. Come on. Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Well, I mean, sort of relevant. What I mean is, it's tenuous, but I've got to get your attention somehow. And if I called my talk, this is just about API testing, then it sounds fairly boring and dull, if you know what I mean. So with that in mind, what I'm trying to say here with the story of Betamax and VHS is that sometimes in software development, the most practical solution is the best one. And that really explains the whole, okay, something was technologically superior, but we sometimes need to go for the more practical thing, right? So given this quote, this leads me on to, I'm going to do two bugbear quotes of the industry that drive me nuts, right? The first one is this. Where am I pointing? That way. Don't mock what you don't own. And this talk is about external API dependencies. You don't own them, but the rule is don't mock what you don't own. And you're like, okay, but I want to do test-driven development for this thing, right? So, and I can't mock it. So whenever I think of this quote, I think of a bit of the Big Lebowski, which is when the dude is sitting in the car of this film and he's talking to what's his name? He's talking to Walter, and he goes, wrong, you're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole. And it's so true, isn't it? Because don't mock what you don't own is like, it's right. It's the right thing. You're like, okay, you don't have control of this. Otherwise, you're writing unit tests for somebody else's stuff, and that makes no sense. But at the same time, you're like, oh, but I need this thing to do this thing. So what do I have to do? So how do I integrate this? And the kind of bugbears of things that come about from this, right, are here's an example of like, we have to get, for this don't mock what you don't own type thing. We already have problems like this to get around with it. This is courtesy of Phil Sturgeon. This one, right? I had to read a book for the first job that I did that was a startup, and his book was called Build APIs That You Won't Hate, and I read it, and my boss was like, you've got to read this book, and I read it, and then he identified this problem, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to run into this problem in the real world. And then I started work, and I actually got it. Here's an HTTP response, right? And it says, okay, here's your response. Right. Well, that doesn't make sense. Thanks. I hate it. Once I had to start on trying to test something like this as an external API, you're like, right, well, the conclusion I'm getting here is, look, we already have to tiptoe around external dependencies anyway, and some of those are just from Composer and things like that, where there's a bug down there. And I mean, we're PHP and we're in a mature ecosystem. You've got to give some real love to the Node developers, right? This is why we need tooling to get around these kind of problems. But this leads me on to my second point, which is that people that think that you need lots of tooling to get around problems means that you don't tackle the problems. So what you do is you end up with this saying: we don't have time for testing. Oh, no. We don't have time for testing. If you say we don't have time for testing, I will judge you. I will judge you and I will come for you. And this is how I will judge you. I will judge you like this, because that's what you are to me. You're clowns, aren't you? But it's not very productive. It just makes me sound sort of like a horrible person and bitter. We need to be a bit more. I need to approach this a bit more sort of practically, of like, right, rather than just laugh at people that just say we don't have time to test anything that we're doing, even though we don't have control over external APIs. We need to find out how this comes about. How does this saying come about? Why do people say this? So here is a real life example from a few years back. Say you want to integrate with something, right? Let's say Shopify. Shopify cloud-based platform. If you want to integrate with it, you do it like this. You have your local application, your web application. In this case, let's say, for example, it's a Symfony app. And then how do you extend off Shopify? You use its REST API. They're trying to force everyone to go to GraphQL. It's not working out that well. But there you go. So you created an application that adds functionality onto Shopify, but it extends off it. How do you do that? There you go. You've got an API. You've got an API key and a secret, and I don't know, you maybe use JWTs or something like that, right? Fine. So I need to test this. So how do I test it? Well, with the kind of industry norm that seems to be the way, or the fastest approach that people think of, like, okay, how do I test this? Well, I've got to cut off the Shopify API. I can't, because otherwise you don't mock what you don't own. I'm not going to do like send live requests during the test suite. That's ridiculous. So I need to ring fence that and keep it to the API. Then I need something to test it with. So in this case, PHP units and PHP spec. The reason why PHP spec is in there is the current library I'm using at the moment uses Prophesize, which is from them by Kieran McNulty and co. So how does it do it? Well, what you do is you create JSON files as fixtures, and then you test them. But you're testing like JSON fixtures as in you're copy and pasting the response from like the Shopify docs into files, right? And then you're testing against them. So not really a sort of live test, is it really? But when it comes to testing and integration testing to see if our app is working, here it comes. Uh-oh. Yay! API change. So Shopify have changed the API. You have not copied the change from there into the JSON fixture files. So therefore, the JSON fixture files are rubbish, right? So PHP Unix like, what? This doesn't work. Don't understand what's going on. And then Clippy appears, and then all of a sudden there's a boat, and then there's bananas flying everywhere, and it's on fire, etc., and the whole thing burns down. So, if you want an explanation as to why people say that is an example. People don't want to do testing because you've got to try and knock out someone's API and you have no control over it. And the only way you can test it is locally without like run it on a server as part of your pipelines. So, that's why you get these problems, right? But that was a live example. Sure, but I've got the same problem right now with what I do for my day-to-day job. I maintain the PHP software development kit for Vonage, right? So there's my library. It's in GitHub. See, it's open source. And it talks to Vonage's APIs, right? And it's an SDK, so it's a wrapper, so it does things nice and convenient in PHP, but really it's lots of fancy wrapped curl calls and things like that. So how does it talk to Vonage? Right, exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same problem. So rather than just sit there and just moan, there's got to be a way around it. So I'm just like, I approach it like, how am I going to do this? So I'm speaking to, so I work in a multi-language team. I'm the PHP advocate, and we have one for Ruby, and we have one for Python, and we have one for Java, and we have one for .NET, etc., etc. So talking to Carl, our Ruby developer, and I'm like, I've got this problem with testing the API. I don't know how to test the API. How am I going to do this? And he's like, well, in Ruby, why don't you just use VCR for it? And I was like, right. What's that? And he's like, yeah, VCR in Ruby. Everyone's done it. And I was like, right, yeah, but I'm in PHP. What do you mean there's a PHP port? And he's like, oh, it must be. There's a port for everything. And then he goes and looks and goes, yeah, okay, yeah, here it is. And I'm like, what's this? What is it? I don't talk me through it. And he's like, yeah, okay, right. So this like blew my mind. Apparently, everybody in the Ruby world knows what this is, and why doesn't anybody? I've not really seen anybody talk about this in PHP really. So what does it do? Here's a rundown of what it does. You take your brand new VCR unit. In this case, it's a Matsui, which is a British company that pretended to be Japanese. It's a Nikam digital stereo, and it has a automatic program set up to auto record at any time of day when you set it, presumably so it can not work. Or in my experience in the 90s, it definitely didn't work. What you do is you've got your VCR set up, and then you insert a blank cassette, or in this case, a limited edition copy of 1993's. No, not that. What am I talking about? You insert a blank copy of your Vonage API and say, "I'm going to record the Vonage API," and you pop it in, and then you record it, and then you put it into your library with other such fantastic API recordings of output, such as Home Alone, Dumb and Dumber, and Gremlins 2. Then you've recorded the output of your unit tests. And then once you store it, when you want to play them back, you switch it from record mode into play mode, press play, and then it replays the API requests back. It doesn't hit the live API at all. And I'm like, what? Well, I mean, it sounds simple. I mean, you know, but how does it do that? So under the hood, what it's actually doing is it takes three ways of intercepting calls over the wire. Either the curl extension in PHP, or if you're an absolute masochist, the SOAP client, so you can actually play back and record stuff off SOAP, or anything that goes in and out of the stream wrapper. And what it does is it intercepts those calls, right? So in Ruby, it does it via monkey patching, where in Ruby, you can actually rewrite the core on the fly, which is nuts. And I didn't know that. But it tries to mimic that by saying, instead of making this curl request, I am now going to intercept this and give you a payload instead. Please don't ask the other question. Oh, okay. You know, you can't speak, but you're asking the other question. But how does it do that, Jim? How does it do that? How does it do the intercepting? And part of developer advocacy is to be very honest. So I'll be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen of Leeds PHP. Please don't ask me how the authors got around Ruby's monkey patching to do this, because it's probably voodoo tea leaves and chicken bones, i.e., I don't know. But it's very clever, it's very complex under the hood, and it's very cool. Well, how does it look? I've just been chatting about sort of like, generally like, oh, it does this, it does this. Let's put it into practice. What you're given from the library, bear in mind, let's say you've downloaded it you've got it via Composer into your project. You've got a base singleton client, you've got a storage path, you've got a storage format, you've got a record and write mode, and you have an on-off eject button, a bit like an actual VCR. So in code, what this is you've got a VCR class. That's your kind of your God object, if you like. in order to be able to read and write the cassette tapes, you have something called the storage path. Now, if you look at the statically called configure method on there, configure returns a VCR configuration object that gives you all the methods to set these things, right? So in this case, set cassette path. And what I've done is I've used Laravel's base path there, /tests / cassettes. So that tells you that configuration tells you where you are storing stuff if you want to store it and where you're reading it from. Storage format, you have a method called set storage, and you've got XML, JSON, and YAML, fairly kind of run of the mill. The mode bit is a really important bit. You can set the mode. Here are 2 modes. There are actually 4 in total, or it might be 5 actually. But the ones that are these are like your main ones, which are set mode to new episodes. That means anything that goes over curl or stream wrapper or soap is recorded until you do that. We'll get on to the next one. Until you do something else, right? But it's in recording mode. Then if you set mode to none, it will not record anything. It will play back whatever cassette you have inserted. And then you have the on and off and eject. On and off, fairly straightforward. When you're running your test suite, you'll want to wrap the on and the off. But eject is the important bit. When you've put it into record mode, you then want to eject the cassette. Or if you want to do something more complex, you might want to have multiple tapes because your application hits multiple other things, right? So that's how it looks. So let's put it into practice from the testing point of view. What I've done is how I'm working with it at the moment is I'm quite a big. It's people. I was going to say people are moaning about it a lot. People on Reddit are moaning about a lot about this, but that's because people on Reddit moan. Pest PHP, which comes from Nuno Maduro, and it's a lot of maintenance from Luke Downing, is a fantastic testing framework that is really a kind of wrapper for PHP units, but with a different API syntax of how it works, but also they're kind of rewriting how the runner works. So includes things like using parallel testing. But the main point is that its code will be more familiar to those that code more in JavaScript because it's copied off Jest. Jest, Pest, same kind of thing. And it's not really a secret. It comes from the Laravel world. That's the reason why. And it's very sort of Laravel-y. There's more closures in the way that the way it's coded. There's less object-oriented stuff and more starting to verge on functional stuff, right? So this test is a live test, right? It will send an SMS to a live server, the live server being the Vonage server, and then it encapsulates a function in a closure, sets up a new Vonage SMS object, gives it config of a to number and a from number, and then the actual text itself, which is hello from Vonage. Then you're going to use the Vonage API, like the SDK thing that I maintain, to send the SMS. And then you get the last SMS out, i.e. the response, and then we're going to test against it. What did it do? So did we send a message? Expect response count to be 1. Is the status valid? Expect the last SMS status to be 0. 0 means that the carrier has transmitted it to someone's GSM mobile phone. Right. So as a test, if you run that, it will cost you money. You're talking to Vonage's servers, right? Not really, no sort of mystery to that. So obviously, how do you put this into your unit test? Well, with VCR, you can. And this is how you sort of do it. This is how I approached looking at it from Pest. Pest has a trait kind of function, which was really set up to deal with things that you want. You want global functionality within your test suite, and the prime example is database migrations. So for every single test or for every single group of tests, you might want to reset your empty database. Oh, it's like a test database, like it's not a full MySQL or Postgres instance. It's just like a SQLite or something like that, if it's a smaller kind of code base. If it's a bigger code base, yeah, you might want to have to actually replicate what's in production, because that makes sense. So the idea is that when you specify, you put traits in to extend off the actual test runner, and then these functions are available to you. So that's what I did. I used this uses keyword and said the VCR trait, and in the VCR trait, I do some wrapped methods like set mode, on, off, eject, and there we go. I've encapsulated the VCR functionality. So If I want to record the test that we just saw, it now looks like this. And the reason why this is now, the Switch VCR is now available on this, is because it's used the trait already. So at the top of it, it's, well, actually, you don't need to specify. It's just in the configuration of pest, and it just says, use that trait so that these methods are available. So switch the VCR on, then set the mode, new episodes, then run the test exactly as I did before, and it will be a live call to Vonage. Then I'm going to eject the VCR, and then I'm going to switch the VCR off. What happens? Well, loaded a cassette, set it to record, eject the tape. What you get is a YAML file. And this kind of markup, for anyone that uses exports of things like Insomnia or Postman, kind of looks like that kind of markup. It's just a big configuration YAML file that says, this was a post request, it went to here. I have actually anonymized those numbers, so please don't try and call them. Well, the keys and the secrets. So it saves it, right? So now let's run the test again. What we want to do is for something like our CI pipeline. So if you've got GitHub Actions, or you've got GitLab, can't remember what it is, GitLab DevOps or something like that, and you want to play it back, you do it like this. You switch the VCR on. Now you load what you've saved, and then you set the VCR mode to none, which is, I want you to play back whatever you intercept.
And we're back.
Hello, everybody. That was an interesting little hiccup. It's not a proper sort of it's not a proper virtual talk unless something like that happens, right? So where did I get to? So yes, this was in playback mode. So the recording automatically resolves. It knows when you made these API calls and what made them. So it just knows that it will load in the tape and then it will record it back, right? And then you switch off the VCR afterwards. So what's happened is the live test is not going to hit Vonage's servers. All it's going to do is record is going to play back the API. So, okay, that's pretty cool. And I need to hit. There we go. Right. Why should I use it? Cassette libraries of API changes versus trying to integrate your apps with documentation. So documentation for something that your app relies on that you're not responsible for, it needs to be up to date. That's not really, okay, that sounds simple, but what I'm saying is that sometimes you get chicken and egg with docs versus API. People accidentally will ship features. People will not tell people about features, or you as a developer have not been reading somebody's newsletter that says we're going to change this and then this is going to be deprecated. It happens and it just comes unexpectedly, right? And because you're using fixtures, if you are using fixtures to test it, it comes unexpected. Whereas if you're doing recording, you now have a single source of truth for your application and your developers. You know that that's what the API does because you've hit it and recorded it, right? So that is, I would say that's kind of a massive advantage of why you should use it. So what, it solves problems like, what if external dependencies, like they accidentally ship stuff, or what if they break Semver? Like they say, like, you casually look at some newsletter or some forum, and they go, yeah, there's a new version, and you look at it and you're like, okay, it's a patch release or it's a minor release, but you haven't got any control of how they're doing their versioning. What happens if it's actually a major backward, like a breaking change? You don't know because you don't control it. So the important thing of doing all of these recordings is that it moves the dependencies from someone else's product to you. Although there are obviously caveats, and I will go through like massive holes in it. Another reason why you should use it is bug turnaround and visibility once you've implemented it. Once you've implemented it, here's an example, right? So let's say you've already got a pest, you've got a whole pest test framework, and what you've done is you've done the recording for it, and then all of your tests are testing against it. A GitHub issue pops up, and you're like, all right, well, the GitHub issue, someone's telling me the API is like, something that this thing of mine is broken, but it's relying on an API call, right? So, okay, what do I do then? Well, I'm going to record a new cassette on my local and then play it back with pest. Hey ho, bingo, it's broken. But you know why it's broken. That's pretty powerful. And on this similar kind of vein, speed, there's a bomb on your boss. Sorry, Keanu. Remember how I said at the start of this talk that we don't have time for testing? That is that with PHP VCR, that is not true, because the speed that you can do things, right? Here's an example. This is ridiculous, right? This is why I keep on saying why people should be using this more. Building the thing, Jim. The thing is in Symfony, right? And it relies on a big external vendor API. I don't know, Shopify or Facebook or Twitter. I don't know. It has to do something to do with that and interact with it. And I've put the Open API spec logo, presumably because they have one, because we're all good citizens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a vendor account. I'm going to record everything, and then I'm going to write the tests. And I've not actually at this point written the code that is actually the UI or the production code or anything like that. Then I'm going to find some way of committing it. We'll get onto that in a minute. Let's commit the tape into sort of source, or you have to be careful with that, obviously, when it comes to PII or S3 bucket or something like that. Go ship it. You've just shipped something that relies on an external API, and you've done it with full TDD, with genuine TDD, where you've started off with tests. To me, that is stonks. The power that has, and that's speed because of offline development, right? So what you can do is, I'm a bit old school. Look at that beautiful Amiga. I'm a bit old school like that, but also, once you've got the recordings and you've committed them, and then that means that no one, especially if you've got something that relies on lots and lots and lots of API calls, but you don't have to rely on lots of API calls. You don't have to worry about timeouts. You don't have to worry about throttling. You've got it all locally. You've already got all the API calls. That's absolutely awesome. But on the same vein, why you should, I'm sort of talking about things that are great. Why should you not use it? External production vendors, right? You've got to set them up. You've still got to set up an account. You've got to work out how you're going to structure the account. What happens if you don't have a staging environment? There's security problems is probably the biggest one, right? You need to set up how you do your secrets, how you do environment variables. Big one, you've got live third-party data. What happens if you set up your tests and like live production data is coming back from the tests? That's a problem. And maybe you can't set up a staging environment. Maybe just whatever platform or SaaS you're using just isn't structured that way, or you have to pay an outrageous license fee to get another one. It might not be possible. And if you have a huge unit test library, if somebody makes a mistake and they set the VCR recording, or let's say that it requires a flag when you're running the test runner, and someone accidentally commits like a change to the pipeline and it runs it live, it might cost you like hundreds or thousands of pounds. So yeah, you've got a bit of a security thing to weigh up there. And the library. I've not really come up with a concrete solution for this, but organizing your cassette library is hard. You've got naming. Do you stick to somebody else's naming convention? Do you stick to your naming convention? Do you someone else's API? Do you version it yourself? I mean, you've got all these kind of things to work, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's difficult though, and you've also bearing in mind you've got to try and version someone else's API somehow. You've also got what happens if you've got I don't know, things that rely on Git tags and your CI pipelines and stuff like that, and you've got your automation needs to hook into this somehow. So you've got to think about the strategy of how you do that. PHP VCR is open source, and I've put this on why you should not use it. But I'll just take a dramatic pause. I should have done a dramatic pause for any Futurama enthusiasts for old jokes. What I'm saying is with open source, wait, okay. I mean, Log4j. But really, I'm not taking a dig at open source at all, naturally. But on the other hand, this library at the moment its last commit is from 2021. It's not being maintained properly. So you've got holes and you've got potential problems with using VCR. But the good news is it's open source. So, there is its author. Go and support its author. Adrian Philippe is quite a hard person to get hold of, but there's the library. If you want to use it more, or you want to, from a company perspective, GitHub sponsor people's work, or fork it and try and maintain it. That's all I'm saying with that. So the conclusions. There is basically there's three big chunks here, right? make sure that PHP VCR fits your use case is the big one, right? It fits my use case, so I am slowly refactoring my PHP SDK that I own and I'm responsible for to use it. I'm doing it piece by piece because there are about sort of 500 tests, and even amongst test suites, that's not even enterprise level. That's actually quite small. But for anything new that Vonage roll out, I am now going to use PHP VCR to record that rather than the fixtures thing, and rather than a lot of API mocking, which quite frankly is especially for developers coming in, the code can be quite confusing if you do lots and lots of mocking and stubs and things like that. So what I'm going to do to make this easier is I am now going to start work on a Laravel and Pest implementation for PHP VCR, where it will actually be like a wrapper to plug into Laravel. That's what I'm doing at the moment. I don't know if it goes well. Maybe I do a Symfony one, or in this case, actually, Slim might be a good option for this. Actually, so that's what I'm doing. It's been a joy to work with, and that was my talk. So, has anybody got any questions? Because usually, I gave this talk quite recently at an open source conference, and everyone didn't know what I was talking about at all. So. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot that I hadn't heard of on there before. It's a really cool idea of recording responses and coming back to them. I've kind of seen similar things in the Java world, but with different namings and stuff. But it's quite cool to see.
There is a when I did this talk fairly recently and adapted slightly for an event called FOSS Asia, which was in Singapore, but it was online because it was open source as a speciality, as part of the conference. Instead of going, I took the PHP and I shied away from the PHP element, and the sort of kicker slide was there are implementations of Ruby was the first one of Ruby's VCR in everything. It's mind blowing. There's one in Golang, there's one in Java, there's one in C# or .NET Core, depending on which one you use. There's one in Python. There's two in Python. So yeah, there's it doesn't matter what language you're using, and obviously a Node, etc., etc. So that's why I put that kind of. That's why I kind of put those slides in for the open source aspect of it. But the concept of it. I mean, in PHP land, we are used to using a language that is entirely from the web, right? And we're used to the request response lifecycle as part of our application development as what we do. So to not know, to not have something like that, being talked about more was kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, I guess it's quite an obvious thing when you think about it, isn't it? Why aren't we all doing this anyway? But we're not. So it's good to have that as an option and have it starting to be used. I guess it sounds like it's been around for quite a while as a way of doing things, just not in so much in the PHP world.
I mean, even the port the port is quite old now. Yeah. It's been maintained. It has been maintained very well, but it's starting to lose kind of steam a bit. And losing steam right now is not very good, especially with sort of PHP. PHP 8.1 is not fully supported. Fibers PHP 8.2 is going to be released soonish. So these are things that with big potential kind of breaking points. So
a lot of deprecations in 8.2 as well, aren't there?
Yeah, yeah. So from that front, I'm kind of praying that if it were, because the reason why I'm praying that somebody kind of takes it on and adopts it is because, quite frankly, it's a complex piece of kit, and I could probably do it, but it'll be hard. And when it comes to core PHP, especially the fact you're basically Adrian has mimicked how Ruby's monkey patching works, and that's under the hood is I don't want to touch that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of those things that's really good and it's there as long as you don't have to touch it too much.
Yeah.
So in terms of questions, the one that's come through so far is So are you periodically testing your recording to make sure that they're up to date, or do you wait until something breaks? So how do you know when that your cassettes are up to date with what the current state of the API is? I think is what they're trying to get.
I think that depends. I think that depends on your use case. If you're going to do something starting to get to sort of enterprisey level stuff, then I would say that you might want to you might be able to get releases. You might be able to get releases out of using the GitHub API if somebody has got a spec that's hosted. When I originally did this talk in my head, I was like going to write something that polls the GitHub API for someone's like hosted open API spec, but you've got to hope that what you rely on actually have a hosted API spec and that it's open source, because it might not be. But you could try sort of a polling thing, but really, I think I would get like a DevOps pipeline for when you want to do a recording that will automate all of the recording process, and then store the current version of that particular either API by API endpoint or API grouping as like an environment variable somewhere where it updates it, or have like a secrets file, so that you've got like, that's the latest recording. You've got something that will set up the recording. Then the full answer to the question is when to do it. I mean, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's like, you can't get something that automated like scanning people's like newsletters, or like, when they're going to like make an API change. Maybe have like a cron that runs and you just poll stuff like, sort of like once a week, once a day, depending on how much it's used. Not sure.
I guess in these cases, it's gonna, if it gets to the point where your tests start failing, that's going to be after someone's made a change to the API upstream, doesn't it? Either at the test level or the production level. So there's going to be, if it fails, it's going to indicate a problem down the line somewhere anyway. So it's better than the current situation. If you haven't got this, then you're only going to find out when there's a live issue, and then you're trying to work out what's actually broken. At least this way you can run the test suite, and then you'll at least be able to see where the problem is, rather than having to go and debug it and look through your logs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what would be like, the reason why I say it depends, like everything, it always depends. The reason why I say it depends is because there might be a situation that is really awesome, whereby, hold on, it was there, I need to get it back. I'm moving windows around and doing too much at the moment. My brain's in my overdrive. No, it's gone. It will come. But okay, right. A situation that'd be really awesome is the third-party vendor has a staging environment that enables you to send test calls. So if they change their API structure, the structure of your dummy data changes, so you know that there's a problem. So in that case, what you could do is you could poll it every time you push, because it's not costing you anything if you've got like a staging, but that's completely dependent. Right? You've no way of knowing, like the way the pricing structure works or something like that. You don't know.
No.
There's also probably like, you probably want to look at integrations in things like Stoplight and like Prism, stuff like that, of like API testing tools that already exist. You can make mock servers and things like that. So maybe there could be a workaround with something like that. There's lots of options, but there's definitely no right answer.
That's definitely a lot of food for thought anyway there. That's the only question we've had so far, but so I think we'll probably call it there. But thanks for sharing that with us. That was really interesting. And thanks everyone for watching, and for bearing with us with our janky tech setup today as well.
Classic technical issues.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for hosting me both.
Yeah, we'll post this on. There'll be a YouTube link, so you can go back and watch it after the fact as well. If anyone wants to go back and rewatch stuff, we'll put that on Twitter and stuff. And otherwise, we'll see you all next time.
Cool. See you later, everyone.
Bye.
TMA, everyone. Bye.